For more on this, I'd like to bring in National Taxpayers Union senior fellow Mattie Duppler. And Mattie, you and I have had this conversation for a couple of weeks. You're in favor of some sort of fiscal package coming out of D.C., but would you be okay with $875 billion for states and cities?
$875 billion, Charles. Let's call it what it is. Almost $1 trillion for state and localities. This is after $150 billion in the CARES Act. Now, it's not to say that states and localities don't need some kind of support from the federal government. The question is, of course, how much? $500 billion, $875 billion, nearly $1 trillion is certainly, almost certainly, way too much. And that's why National Taxpayers Union has called for strict guardrails on any funding that goes out the door, particularly the funding that goes out the door to states. It needs to be money that is specifically earmarked for COVID-related purposes, not for bailing out states that have spending largesse problems, not for states that have pension problems, which we've heard the majority leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, talk about. That certainly, I think, is a position that Republicans are unified on. Of course, you heard Blake mention a couple of the other sticking points. There still may be a lot of room to cover to get a final deal out of Congress this week.
On the state issue in these cities, though, Mattie, what about the states that closed longer, stayed closed longer than other states that seem like they're willing to reclose or stall their economies much quicker than other states? It's sort of tough when a state like Texas is saying, hey, we're going to give it a try. We're going to go out there. We're going to open the businesses up. We're going to try and generate economic opportunities. And other states are saying, well, we're going to reclose, but we want the federal government to cover us. I mean, can you have it both ways is what I'm asking.
You can't have it both ways in politics or in policy, Charles. But, there's no question that states have had different experiences over the past 7 months as we've tried to fight coronavirus. I'm back in my home of Washington, D.C. I've just spent the last several months in Wisconsin. And I think that, Republicans in particular like to try and give states the lead so that they can have a much more sophisticated and targeted response to their local populations. But Wisconsin, I think, is a perfect example of how even the state couldn't get it right. You've got the Supreme Court overturning the governor's orders, but the Republicans in that state, they're not being able to come up with a plan. What we need are public health officials and economic policymakers to get together and acknowledge that this requires a targeted and consistent approach. And I think that could go a really long way, both at the state and the federal level.
All right, I'm getting the wrap signal. Just real quick, yes or no. Will something happen? Will they come up with an agreement in the next 24, 48 hours or so?
48 hours. We still got to the end of the week when the House is supposed to be out, Charles. As you and I both know, it won't be until the 11th hour that a deal comes together.
Yeah, I thought the 11th hour was last week. Mattie, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
That's right, Charles.
For people getting those evictions, the